battling. That's how we met. We was in the Bronx in the pool hall. After that battle, he went to like a show. He got on stage, Jay-Z, where you at?
Boom, boom. When that said, Jay wasn't lying. Everybody that was on that tour at that point in time was like, we could just pack our shit.
Before Roc Nation champagne deals and billionaire boardrooms, Jay-Z had a serious problem, and that problem had a name, DMX. Back in the late 90s, backstage at a Def Jam event in Manhattan, things almost got out of hand. The tension between Jay-Z and DMX was so thick it could cut glass. People there said it felt like the calm before a storm, and years later, even 50 Cent claimed Jay was lucky. Lucky DMX didn't pull the trigger that day. This wasn't just rap beef. It was a standoff soaked in street code, loyalty, and power. What went down that night got buried for years until now, early 90s, before platinum plaques, before champagne deals, before all the luxury boardrooms. New York's underground was still raw and hungry. Deep in the Bronx, inside a cramped, smoky studio with busted speakers and Redman posters peeling off the wall, two young MCs stepped up for a showdown. It was 1994. The city was cold, corners were still ruled by crack hustlers, and hip-hop was transforming from street battles to serious business.
No. Dripping sweat. They going crazy. In between songs, he can't even hear what he's saying because they screaming.
Jay-Z, born Sean Carter, had already been making noise. He'd been hustling both in the game and on the mic, freestyling on Jazzo's records and flipping weight back in the Marcy projects. Known for his lightning-fast flow and icy composure, Jay walked in that room ready to claim his spot in the underground scene. And across from him was a growl, a force, a threat waiting to strike, DMX. The Bronx was about to witness something legendary. This was way before Reasonable Doubt, before Jay-Z became a boss with billion-dollar meetings and private jets. Back then, he was just a man with bars, ambition, and a serious chip on his shoulder. DMX, real name Earl Simmons, came storming in from Yonkers with no shirt, no chain, just raw energy. He was out of breath, straight off the block, no industry polish, no label power. What he did bring was pain, rage, and a notebook filled with fire. X had just started buzzing on DJ Clue's mixtapes and popping up on Stretch and Bobbito's legendary WKCR 89.9 radio show, where hungry, unsigned MCs went to lyrical war. He wasn't signed, he wasn't refined, but he was flat out dangerous. People who were there that night, producers, interns, even the studio security, swear they felt the air change when the cypher began. Jay-Z approached the mic like a chess master, calm, steady, and cold. Every rhyme was tight, stacked with multis and clever flips, like he was plotting every move 3 steps ahead. But when DMX stepped up, everything flipped. He growled, he barked, his voice hit like a weapon, and suddenly, that small Bronx studio felt like a cage match. Every bar he spit had bite, every verse felt like it could draw blood. X ain't rap, he attacked, said Uncle Murder, remembering that wild night. The tape? It never officially dropped. There's no clean footage, just whispers, just stories passed from block to block like folklore. Some say DMX edged it out, others say Jay-Z stood firm but couldn't shake that feeling. Even though they dapped it up afterward, everyone knew something real had started that night, and that tension never fully went away. It wasn't just a rap battle that night, it was the start of a cold rivalry built on silence, pride, and mutual suspicion.
We met battling. That's how we met. We was in the Bronx in the pool hall. After that battle, he went to like a show. He got on stage, Jay-Z, where you at?
To DMX, Jay-Z always smelled like industry politics. Too smooth, too detached, too polished to be real. That rubbed X the wrong way deep down. Years later, he'd still be holding on to that feeling, saying in the Ruff Ryders documentary, "That dude ain't give me no love when I was down. I don't forget that." Jay, on the other hand, never threw shade at X in public. He played it cool, always moving like a boss in control. But people close to him swore Jay saw something in DMX's eyes that day. Something dark, cold, and ready to snap at any second. That Bronx studio face-off became the stuff of legend, one of the last real underground rap battles before both men shot into superstardom. But that night didn't end in peace. It was just the first round of a silent war that would last for years. By '98, the underground days were long gone. Jay-Z and DMX had both exploded into icons, carving their own lanes in a rap world that was now swimming in money, contracts, and corporate power moves. Jay-Z dropped Volume 2, Hard Knock Life, a straight-up monster of an album that went 5 times platinum. Tracks like Can I Get A and that iconic title cut flipped Annie's sample into pure gold. Jay wasn't just rapping anymore, he was making business plays, stepping into boardrooms, shaking hands with CEOs, and talking about ownership long before the culture caught up. Meanwhile, DMX came in like a full-blown earthquake. In May 1998, he dropped It's Dark and Hell is Hot, gritty, raw, and dripping with pain. It wasn't made for radio, it was made for the streets, and the streets felt every word. Then, just 7 months later, he came back swinging with Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, 2 platinum albums in 1 year. DMX was unstoppable, a wild storm that couldn't be contained. But as their fame grew, so did the tension. Both were kings, but the throne was only big enough for one. Another #1 album in the same year, DMX did the unthinkable. 2 back-to-back #1 albums, both going multi-platinum. He wasn't just hot, he was on fire. His music bled with pain, darkness, and raw faith. He spoke for the broken, the forgotten, the real ones in the streets. DMX had become the people's champ, and he did it without corporate help, without fancy suits, and without strategy meetings. He didn't need a boardroom, he had the block behind him. But while the world was praising him, tension was brewing behind the scenes. On paper, both Jay-Z and DMX were Def Jam artists, label mates. In reality, they couldn't have been more different. Jay-Z was all precision and planning, studying every move like a chess player lining up his next checkmate. He knew the game, the business, the timing, everything was strategy. DMX, he was the total opposite, raw, emotional, and explosive. He moved from instinct, from heart, from pain. He didn't care about politics, and he definitely didn't trust them suits or Jay-Z. That distrust didn't stay hidden either. It followed them straight onto the road.
I was actually forced to be an artist and a businessman because when I tried to get a deal, I couldn't get a deal, so I had to create Roc-A-Fella Records. We actually created Roc-A-Fella Records from nothing.
When the Hard Knock Life Tour launched in late 1998, it was a historic moment for hip-hop. Jay-Z was headlining, bringing a stacked lineup: Method Man, Redman, Beanie Sigel, and of course DMX. On stage, it looked perfect. Crowds screaming, lights flashing, hip-hop at its peak. But backstage, whole different story. DMX kept to himself, barely speaking to Jay. Word around the crew was that X was watching everything and everyone, especially Jay-Z. He didn't like the vibe, didn't like the setup, didn't like the way things moved. To DMX, that tour wasn't about unity, it was a chessboard. And in his eyes, Jay was the one moving all the pieces. The tension wasn't loud, but it was heavy. So heavy, you could feel it even when the music stopped. Meanwhile, Jay-Z was leveling up, slowly but surely, making power moves with Dame Dash and Kareem Biggs Burke by his side. Together, they were turning Roc-A-Fella from a label into a full-blown empire. Jay wasn't just chasing hits anymore. He was building a legacy, a business, a brand that could stand toe-to-toe with the biggest in the game. Behind closed doors at Def Jam, the execs were watching closely. To them, Jay-Z looked like the perfect hybrid, polished, business-minded, and still real enough to speak the language of the streets. He could sit with CEOs one moment and drop bars the next. They saw him as the future of the company. DMX saw it too, and it didn't sit right with him. When Def Jam started whispering about leadership changes, the streets began buzzing. Word was that Leor Cohen and Kevin Liles were already backing Jay-Z for a higher position, giving him more control over the label's direction. Roc-A-Fella wasn't just successful, it was thriving, and Def Jam wanted in on that energy. So when Jay-Z started getting more say in how the label was run, DMX took it as pure disrespect. To him, Jay wasn't just leveling up, he was climbing over everyone else to do it. The idea of Jay-Z becoming his boss, that was unthinkable. DMX didn't believe Jay earned it in the same trenches he did, not the same struggle, not the same scars. To X, Jay's rise wasn't just a career move, it was a threat to everything hip-hop stood for. The authenticity, the hunger, the pain, DMX felt like the industry was handing the culture over to the suits, and Jay-Z was their chosen one. What once started as mutual respect had twisted into something darker. Silent tension, paranoia, and quiet resentment creeping between two giants. So when Jay-Z officially accepted the presidency of Def Jam in the early 2000s, the fallout hit deep. It wasn't just business, it was personal. For DMX, it confirmed everything he'd been saying for years. To him, Jay-Z had become the very system he fought against. And from that moment on, there was no more brotherhood, no more trust, only distance and unresolved anger.
You know, I go to do the 6th album, and you know,
Jay-Z became president.
Yeah. When he first got the job, he hit me with the call like, yo, dog, DMX is running the building, like, yo, you good? Finish the album, shoot the video. What happened? Niggas go on vacation.
By early 2002, the quiet tension between Jay-Z and DMX had officially reached its breaking point. What once started as creative rivalry had twisted into something far more serious, territorial, political, and deeply personal. Jay-Z wasn't just a rapper anymore. He was the new president of Def Jam, the most powerful position in East Coast hip-hop. He now controlled the same label that once doubted him, the same building where he and DMX used to hustle for attention and scraps of opportunity. But with that new power came decisions. And one of those decisions would push things too far. Behind closed doors in Def Jam's Manhattan offices, some say it was the 8th floor, inside the executive boardroom, Jay-Z reportedly made a call that set everything off. According to people close to DMX, Jay decided to delay the release of X's next album, saying the timing wasn't right and the market was too crowded. From a businessman's point of view, it sounded strategic, but to DMX, it was straight betrayal. From his side, X felt he built that label. He believed he carried Def Jam through the late 90s when things were shaky. It was his fire that kept the lights on. It's dark and hell is hot, flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, and then there was X. All #1 albums, all straight from his soul. He poured his pain into those records, and now the same label that used his voice to rise was trying to silence him. And worst of all, it was Jay-Z, the one man he already didn't trust, calling the shots. That night, something inside DMX broke. According to insiders who were there or close enough to hear the chaos, X showed up at Def Jam's headquarters unannounced, shirtless, sweating, wild-eyed, clearly not in a calm state of mind. Security tried to stop him, but he wasn't listening to anyone. He stormed past the front desk, through the halls, heading straight for the executive floor. He wasn't there to talk business, and this wasn't a meeting request. It was a confrontation. The man who once shared stages and studio ciphers with Jay-Z was now marching straight toward him, ready to demand answers face to face. The silence of their long, cold war was about to explode into something no one could stop. He now saw Jay-Z as more than just a rival. He saw him as a traitor and an oppressor.
How do you listen to a whole album, pick a single, shoot a video, then don't know? Okay, I see what's really good. You're trying to eliminate the competition. Then get me off the label. Now you're back rapping again.
Inside Def Jam's Manhattan office, Jay was already in the boardroom, surrounded by execs, assistants, and maybe a few Roc-A-Fella loyalists watching the tension build. What happened next has been whispered through the industry for years like an urban legend. DMX exploded into that meeting without warning. The door flew open and the whole energy in the room just collapsed. Every head turned as X stormed in, shirtless and shaking, his eyes locked on Jay-Z. He pointed straight at him, his voice trembling, but not from fear, from rage. "You think you my boss? I made this label hot." Those words hit the room like a gunshot. Jay-Z didn't rise, didn't shout, didn't even blink. He just sat there, calm, stone-faced, like he'd already calculated every possible outcome. But the silence that followed was brutal, thick enough to choke on. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone in that room could feel something was about to happen, and no one knew if it would end in words or in chaos. Some witnesses later claimed DMX reached toward his waistband like he was ready to prove a point. Others said he didn't need to. His glare alone froze the room. That 1,000-yard stare was no bluff. It was the look of a man who'd seen the streets at their worst and survived. One anonymous Def Jam staffer later said security was just seconds away from tackling him before everything suddenly shifted. Maybe it was Jay-Z's calmness, maybe it was the eyes watching from every corner of that boardroom, or maybe X just wanted to make sure his message landed without crossing that final line. Whatever the truth, Jay-Z never spoke publicly about that day. But insiders swear he left that room changed, alive, untouched, but different. From then on, Jay kept things polite in public, always professional, even cordial. Yet behind the scenes, every time DMX's name came up, his tone changed. Calm but sharp, like he hadn't forgotten how close it came to blowing up for real. That day at Def Jam wasn't just an argument, it was a warning shot that neither man would ever forget. By the early 2000s, the world finally understood. DMX wasn't just playing a role, he was the role. Every growl, every scream, every tear he poured into a verse came from a life soaked in pain, chaos, and survival. There was no alter ego, no stage mask, just Earl Simmons, a man torn between genius and self-destruction, a man who never truly left the streets even when he ruled the charts. From 1991 to 2013, DMX was arrested over 30 times. Yeah, you read that right. More than 30 arrests across multiple states for all kinds of charges. This wasn't tabloid gossip or street rumor. It was court-certified fact. His life read like a mixtape of chaos, each track louder than the last, each verse written in fire and gasoline. In 1998, just months after It's Dark and Hell is Hot went platinum, X got caught in New Jersey with an unlicensed firearm. The hip-hop world couldn't believe it. He had just broken into stardom, and already the law was at his back. But that was DMX. He lived fast, he moved real, and trouble followed him like a shadow. By 2000, things got even wilder. DMX made headlines after being arrested in Buffalo for allegedly carjacking someone's ride. Witnesses said he snapped during an argument, stormed off, and sped away in another man's car. No security, no team, just X in a rage, moving off pure emotion. Then came 2004, one of his most infamous moments. At JFK Airport, DMX was arrested after reportedly impersonating an FBI agent and trying to take control of a vehicle. Police claimed he flashed a fake badge, shouted commands like he was on a mission, and tried to seize a car right there in the terminal. Every incident added another layer to his legend. Part tragedy, part chaos, all real. DMX wasn't a rapper pretending to be tough. He was living every bar he ever spit. And the world couldn't decide if it was watching a superstar rise or a man crumble under his own fire. When the cops finally arrived, they found crack and a gun sitting right inside the SUV DMX was driving. Another headline, another case, another piece of the storm that followed him everywhere. By 2007, things got even darker. Animal cruelty charges hit the news. Authorities raided his property out in Arizona, and what they found was heartbreaking. Dozens of pit bulls, some starving, some already gone, others chained up with no food or water. DMX claimed he hadn't been home for months, that others were supposed to care for the dogs. But the court didn't buy it. The judge saw negligence. The streets saw a man drowning in his own chaos. And after that, the arrests never stopped coming. Drug possession, parole violations, skipping child support, driving with no license, even scuffling with officers. It was endless. Some stints behind bars lasted days. Others dragged on for months. But one thing never changed. DMX didn't fake it for the cameras. He never hid behind fame or made excuses. He owned his pain, his rage, his brokenness, and that raw honesty made people love him even more. It became a haunting cycle. For every hit record, there was a mugshot. For every sold-out show, there was a warrant. Every time he rapped about demons, angels, and redemption, the world knew he was fighting those same battles in real life. By the late 2000s, the public saw a superstar falling apart. But the streets saw something else, a man who feared nothing. To those who really knew that life, and especially to Jay-Z, DMX wasn't just another rapper with legal trouble. He was unpredictable, fearless, and dangerous in the most real way. X didn't care about rules, didn't care about labels, didn't care about consequences. When a journalist asked him during a 2009 jailhouse interview if he feared death, he looked straight into the camera and said, "I ain't scared of death, man. I done seen worse than hell." Jay-Z knew that. Everyone in the game did. That's why, even when the two traded subliminal shots on records, Jay with his slick, cold metaphors and DMX with his growls, screams, and open callouts, it never went further. Both men understood what was underneath those bars. This wasn't just music. It was tension, history, and survival clashing on wax. There was always a line, one both Jay-Z and DMX refused to cross, but it wasn't about mutual respect. It was about survival. Jay-Z understood what it meant to go head-to-head with someone who had nothing to lose, someone who had looked straight into the darkness and barked back at it.
Police in New Jersey are investigating claims that rapper DMX was involved in a robbery. A man says the rapper and his entourage pulled out a gun and demanded his money at a gas station.
In the corporate rooms, Jay moved with logic and strategy. But DMX, he was unpredictable. In the studio, he was lightning, wild, emotional, unstoppable. In real life, though, he was dangerous. Not the kind of danger rappers bragged about in their verses, but the kind that came from real scars, real trauma, real war. A wounded animal doesn't bluff, it strikes, whether you flinch or not. Jay-Z, no matter how high he climbed, never underestimated that. He knew exactly who DMX was, a man you never pushed too far. By 2003, everything had changed. The game wasn't about lyrics anymore, it was about power. On one side stood Jay-Z, climbing the highest ladders of business and culture, turning himself from a street hustler into a corporate legend. He wasn't just a rapper anymore, he was a mogul in motion, sitting courtside with CEOs, cutting deals, releasing hit after hit, and perfecting that image of calm, clean success. His relationship with Beyonce only amplified it. Suddenly, Jay wasn't just winning, he was untouchable. And on the other side, DMX, still raw, still growling into the void, but now drowning in addiction, legal battles, and frustration with an industry that seemed to be shutting him out. Every door that used to swing open for him was slowly locking up, and the worst part, he believed the man holding those keys was Jay-Z. Between 2003 and 2006, X watched from the sidelines as Def Jam shifted under Jay's control. The label that once celebrated his rise now felt cold, distant, corporate. To DMX, it wasn't just business, it was betrayal. He believed the streets made him, but the suits buried him. And standing at the top of it all was Jay-Z, the same man he once battled in that smoky Bronx studio. His label, his home, had started turning its back on him. And DMX wasn't just being paranoid, the signs were real. As Def Jam's president, Jay-Z had the final say. He approved budgets, greenlit projects, and decided which artists got the spotlight. And during that time, a pattern began to unfold that DMX couldn't ignore. The label started pushing a new image, fresh faces, clean looks, radio-ready stars. Acts like Rihanna, Neo, and Young Jeezy were getting heavy promotion, big budgets, and primetime marketing. Meanwhile, DMX's new music sat waiting, ignored, delayed, or quietly shelved. The man who once carried Def Jam through its darkest years was now being treated like a leftover from a past era. Then came 2006, the breaking point. DMX dropped his 6th studio album, Year of the Dog, again. But instead of the grand return fans expected, it landed with barely a whisper. Not because the music lacked fire, X poured his soul into every verse, but because the label barely lifted a finger to promote it. No major radio push, no press rollout, no serious tour backing. It was as if Def Jam wanted it to disappear. To X, this wasn't neglect, it was sabotage. He didn't just feel ignored, he felt erased, replaced by shinier, safer stars, forgotten by the same machine he helped feed. According to insiders who worked close to both men, quiet moves were happening behind closed doors. Some collaborations featuring DMX mysteriously got shelved. Certain offers never reached him. His name stopped coming up in meetings where it once carried weight. Even the DJs who used to scream his name on mixtapes began going silent. And the reason? Simple. DMX was no longer a safe investment. Too raw, too unpredictable, too real for the direction Def Jam was heading. Under Jay-Z's leadership, the label had transformed, sleek, brand-focused, built for corporate partnerships and crossover appeal. It wasn't about grit anymore, it was about growth. DMX represented the pain, the struggle, the danger, the parts of hip-hop that couldn't be bottled and sold to boardrooms. For DMX, it felt like the game he helped build had turned on him, and the man sitting in the president's chair was the one tightening the locks. There was no space left in Def Jam for a man like DMX, a walking time bomb of truth, pain, and unpredictability. So he made a move that shocked everyone. He walked away. DMX cut ties with Def Jam and went independent. It was a bold, fearless decision, one that gave him his freedom, but also stripped away the machine that once fueled his rise. No more massive budgets, no glossy marketing campaigns, no industry protection, just X, raw, unfiltered, and on his own. He started recording under smaller labels, performing in clubs overseas, releasing projects with barely any promotion. The stage lights were dimmer, the crowd smaller, but his fire never went out. Yet behind every verse, every growl, that anger kept boiling. It didn't fade, it festered. He felt betrayed, not just by the industry, but by Jay-Z himself. In DMX's eyes, they came from the same world, two wolves in a rap jungle full of sheep. They had battled, struggled, and clawed their way to the top together. But when the power shifted, when Jay had the chance to extend a hand, he didn't. He offered silence, and X never forgot that. The 2010s brought a strange calm between the two titans. At least on the surface, Jay-Z had become untouchable by then, a global icon. He turned Roc Nation into a full-fledged empire, diving into tech investments, billion-dollar business deals, and headline-making partnerships. By 2010, Jay wasn't just a rapper. He was the blueprint for power in hip-hop. Albums like Watch the Throne and 444 showed how far he had evolved, no longer just spitting bars from Marcy projects, but speaking from boardrooms, private jets, and luxury penthouses. He transcended the game entirely, becoming the polished face of hip-hop success. Meanwhile, DMX was in a very different kind of fight. One for his life, his sanity, and his soul. Years of addiction, jail time, and personal heartbreak had carved deep wounds. The fame, the chaos, the trauma, they'd all taken their toll. He wasn't the unstoppable hitmaker of the late 90s anymore, but he wasn't gone either. Through all the pain, the world still felt his presence because DMX never stopped being real. His voice, his story, and his spirit still carried the weight of everything he'd lived through and everything he'd lost. And even through all the darkness, there were quiet signs that Jay-Z hadn't completely forgotten about DMX. In 2012, rumors started circulating through the music world. Word was that Roc Nation was talking about a possible DMX comeback deal. According to insiders, some of Jay's closest executives had reached out, hoping to bring X into the Roc Nation fold, not as a new signee, but as a respected legacy act. The plan was bold: clean up the chaos, rebuild his image, back him with a strong team, support a tour, maybe even help him drop one last powerful album. It was the kind of deal that could have given DMX the redemption arc fans always wanted to see. But it never happened. The deal fell apart before it ever truly began. Why? Depends on who you ask. Some say DMX didn't trust the hands reaching out to help. Others say he refused to let anyone, especially Jay-Z, have control over his next move. To X, it was never about contracts, streaming numbers, or brand management. It was about truth, loyalty, and authenticity. And the industry, as always, had other priorities. Still, even through all the turbulence, flashes of DMX's brilliance kept breaking through. One of the most unforgettable came in 2020 during the height of the pandemic when DMX stepped into the Verzuz arena for a legendary live face-off against Snoop Dogg. The event streamed to millions across the world, and for the first time in years, fans saw DMX in a new light. He wasn't slurring, he wasn't distant, he was alive, healthy, focused, full of life. He smiled, he cracked jokes, he laughed with Snoop, and when he rapped those old hits, his eyes welled up with emotion. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was resurrection. That night, people saw the version of DMX that could have been, if the demons had ever loosened their grip. The world remembered why they fell in love with him in the first place, because his pain was real and his spirit was unstoppable. And somewhere behind the scenes, even Jay-Z was watching. Years later, when he finally spoke about DMX in an interview, his tone wasn't cold or calculated. It carried weight, emotion, and something that sounded a lot like respect. Jay-Z's words carried weight, and they carried guilt. X brought out something in me that nobody else did, Jay admitted in that rare interview. I respected him. I just couldn't control him. That one line said everything, because control was never what DMX wanted. Not from the streets, not from the system, not from the industry, and definitely not from a former rival turned record executive. What DMX craved was realness, unfiltered truth, loyalty with no fine print, and protection that didn't come with a hidden cost. But in an industry built on smoke, mirrors, and money, realness was always in short supply. Over time, the hope for a true reconciliation between the two legends began to fade. There were no headline-grabbing hugs, no Roc Nation contracts, no photo ops or press releases, but what remained between them ran deeper. Mutual regret. DMX regretted trusting too few. Jay-Z regretted stepping in too late. Both men had climbed to the top of completely different worlds, one wrapped in luxury and designer suits, the other still clawing his way through pain, addiction, and the search for peace. And yet, no matter how far apart they stood, their names would always be connected, not just by beef, but by brotherhood, by battle, and by scars that never really healed. Two wolves who once shared the same hunger, now separated by power, pride, and time. In the early hours of April 2nd, 2021, the silence of White Plains, New York was broken by the sound of sirens racing through the night. Emergency responders were rushing to a private residence. Earl Simmons, DMX, had collapsed after suffering a massive heart attack reportedly triggered by a drug overdose. By the time he reached the hospital, his brain had already been starved of oxygen. The world that had watched him fight through every storm suddenly found itself holding its breath, praying for a miracle.
Rapper DMX is on life support after suffering a heart attack. His attorney confirmed the news this weekend.
The same man who had battled demons, defied the odds, and roared his pain into microphones for decades was now fighting for his life. And this time, there were no bars, no stages, no crowds, just the quiet hum of machines, the prayers of millions, and the heavy truth that even the strongest warriors can fall. Machines kept him breathing, but DMX never woke up. For a week, fans across the world prayed, hoping for a miracle that never came. Outside the hospital, crowds gathered with candles, speakers blasting Ruff Ryders' anthem, and voices crying out for the man who gave them strength through his pain. On April 9th, 2021, at just 50 years old, DMX was pronounced dead. The world mourned loudly. Social feeds flooded with memories, tributes, and tears. But Jay-Z grieved quietly. No public statements, no verses, no interviews, just silence. Yet behind the scenes, whispers spread that Jay-Z and Beyonce had quietly purchased DMX's master recordings, not for profit, but to return them to his children. A private gesture of respect, a way to protect the legacy of a man who had given everything to his art, even when it cost him everything else. Because DMX was never just a rapper. He was a storm, a spiritual force that couldn't be packaged or controlled. He was rage and love, chaos and faith all at once. Like 50 Cent later said, X was the realest to ever do it. Jay was lucky he made it out that room. When DMX left this world, hip-hop lost more than an icon. It lost its pulse, its raw heart, its truth. No lights, no awards, no money could ever replace that. Jay-Z never dissed DMX again. Never dropped a subliminal, never tried to rewrite their story, because some energies are too real to touch, too sacred to twist. That day back in 2002, when DMX stormed into Def Jam shirtless, furious, and fearless, Jay-Z didn't see a rival, he saw a warning. Not from an enemy, but from a man with nothing to lose. A man molded by pain, loyalty, and survival. From that moment on, Jay chose silence. Because some stories don't need spin, and some legends speak loudest when the music stops. DMX will forever be remembered as that voice, the growl, the prayer, the truth. His energy still shakes speakers, his pain still echoes through generations, and his legacy still burns bright in every soul that ever felt forgotten. If you felt this story, like, comment, subscribe, and share to keep the legend of DMX alive. Let the world remember the man who turned his pain into power and his struggle into sound.